I spent 4 hours. Day in deep contemplation. So that's why.
Well, there you go. You're in the wilderness.
That's why I was there.
Anything new and exciting in your life?
No.
No. Okay, me too. Same old, same old.
Same old crap.
Yeah, you got it.
Oh, Mary finally left me though. She's
Mary,
not here.
she left you.
Yeah.
Well, I've been talking to her about that. I actually suggested it.
She's on mine.
Seemed to be a reasonable thing.
It was a doctor's appointment later, so she said, set me up online.
Yeah.
There she is.
I'm listening to this, you know.
Uh-oh.
She can't hear us.
We thought we were anonymous.
That's right. Guess she can't hear us. Close the shutters, Mary.
Okay.
Gotta be careful.
Yes.
Big sister is watching. We're listening.
I like how Reverend Lynn says, I don't usually advise people to get divorced, but in your case, I'm making it very special.
Well, it seems like a really smart thing for Mary.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That was funny. Well,
Yeah,
geez.
I've recommended divorce.
Either way, yeah, sometimes you have to. Yeah. It's very loud. I did not get to watch that video yet, Reverend Lynn, but I read the piece, but I haven't watched it yet. I know that was honestly, I have to say, Mike, that was one of my highlights. That's one of the only pleasurable moments in the last 2 weeks was Monday Night Football last night. So there you go. Because the Dodger stuff was terrible, and yeah, sports is not allowed for me.
What more do you want?
No, that's good. No, but it's not. That's Schadenfreude. That's like celebrating. You don't want to do that too much. But it's not as satisfying as having a win. So that was a win last night. That was a win for goodness. No, I'm talking about Kirk Cousins. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. Good guy. Seems like it. I don't know. For an athlete, he seems to have his priorities together with at least with his family, at least on TV and the quarterback show on Netflix. He seemed like he had his act together.
Is he dating?
He's not dating any. No, he's got seems like he has a stable relationship and anyways, whatever. But yes, there has not been many moments of enjoyment. I have a feeling that honestly, the moments of enjoyment over the next couple of weeks are going to be like when a hostage gets released. I mean, it's such a weird thing. And this one, obviously, there was interviews and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have to figure out what to do. I can't, what can you say, man? What can you say? You just see your friends, your mother, your aunt, whatever. I mean, it's like she's like everybody's aunt. But anyways, but I found out yesterday that somebody I know, I posted about it, Leah Kawasawa, who is a member of our community. She has cousins she has a cousin who's probably been killed, but the wife and two daughters are kidnapped. So I can't, they're cousins, and it's her father's, it's on her father's side. So I can't imagine what it's like to actually, I mean, I know
Do
people.
Do we know any more about the 2 hostages? Now we have 4 hostages released.
Yeah.
The latest 2, do we know?
Yes, the 2 that were released were seniors. I don't know they averaged in the early 80s, and they said they were, well, at least one of the reports the interview I heard was, she said she was treated pretty well. But I can't imagine what it's like to be thinking that you're going to wake up one day in your bedroom and then the next year in it, and I whatever. I mean, it's all so horrible. But
I have a friend an acquaintance in the building where we live, who I've always thought of as a rational sort of person. And yesterday I spoke to her about something else, and she said, "Death to all Arabs." I said, wait a minute.
I can't.
She just went on and on.
Listen, you're gonna have a lot of irrational and angry and frustrated people right now who aren't really sure how to channel I don't know what to say. You can't really say anything. But people are definitely angry right now, and there's a lot of frustration. And yeah, I mean, I think almost everybody is acting fairly rational so far, but I don't know what I would do if I had my own family members. I don't know if I'd be able to sleep. I don't get it. I can't sleep now. So I don't know. I got 4 hours of sleep last night, and I thought that was good. I woke up at 2:00 last night. I'm not sure what time I went to. I think I went to bed early, like 11:30. So I think that was pretty good. But I mean, to me, I was like, I got till 2:00 or 2:30. And then, I mean, I went back to sleep a little bit, but that to me is like, if I can get 4 hours of sleep right now, I feel like I've got a victory. But I know, and it's multiplying out. I can't, it's definitely.
What do you do when you wake up like that? Do you watch the news or go read, or
no,
how do you quiet your mind?
That's one thing I don't do, is I don't turn on the TV, but but still reading a tablet or looking at your phone, is going to get you upset anyways. But
Right.
I just try to, I just try to keep, not getting, learning what I need to learn and then just go back to sleep. But I'm reading emails, and, there's people in Israel who are already up. I'm texting sometimes or WhatsApp, texting, when it's still texting with people who are up. And, I mean, it's their day already. And, so I guess part of it's also the time difference, because it's weird. Like by the afternoon here, what's going to happen has happened, unless there's rockets happening and stuff like that all the time. There's war happening. But as far as statements coming out of Israel or those kinds of announcements of hostage being released or something that's new, it's not going to happen after 2:00 in the afternoon. It's 12:00 at night there, and there's people are sleeping. I mean, people are sleeping. There are people in Israel and Gaza and the Middle East that are sleeping. There's probably not going to be anything. So just weird, because you're like, oh, it's the middle of the day. Why did all of a sudden go dead? And you're like, oh yeah, people are sleeping, because you forget, you're on a different, you're almost a half day off. So anyways, I don't know what's going to happen when I'm there in 2 weeks. I'm leaving in 2 weeks from, or whatever, this weekend. And so we'll see.
How long will you be gone?
for 4 days. I mean, I'll be gone. I'll be in the country for 4 days. I'll get there on the 10th, and I basically leave the late night on the 14th. So like 1 o'clock in the morning. So I'm there for 4 full days. 10th, 11th, 12th, no, 5 days. 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th. So, but who knows? I mean, I have no idea what's going to happen during that time, and hopefully I just hope it's better than it is now. But
Will
they
you take
started.
pictures and post what's going on?
Yeah, I'll post if I have. If I'm not going to just post. I'm not the kind. I mean, I just don't post.
I know, but I'd
Here's
like to see.
here's my breakfast. But
No.
I will, if there's something. Yes, I will post if there's something that I'll try to be a little bit better on it. I tend not to be very good at.
Yeah, terrible.
It's just breakfast. Anyways, they have really good breakfast in Israel. So,
So, take pictures of the bacon that he's eating.
yeah. Oh, it's so hard to find bacon in Israel. That's worth taking a picture of. It's almost worth eating bacon. Just 1 second. Oh, geez. So it shows you how focused I am that I forgot to even turn on the camera. I mean,
Oh, there you are.
so thank you, Judith. That was Judith that reminded me. Thank you, Judith. So yeah. Well, wait a second. How do I is that here? You know what? Sorry. I gotta do it from in there. But we got everybody. I know that Rosemary's going to have to jet out of here a little early, so
No, actually, I already did what I need to do.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Well, congratulations, Rosemary, for being here and having a good day. I will remind people that where we are in Ezekiel. Where we left off last week was one of the last lines we read was this crazy line that we just read at Tashlich, which was cast away the transgressions, Tashlichu, kol pishachem, all your transgressions, all your screw ups. The word pishachem is your pasha, your transgressions is the way they translated it. It's a little different than the word chet in the Bible, which is sin or transgression. Though sometimes they seem to be used kind of synonymously, but we use both of them at high holidays. But they're definitely things that you have messed up. But what's beautiful about this, again, is that you have a new heart and a new spirit. Lev chadash veruach chadasha. By the way, you can see that, I didn't mention this last week. You can see that a lev is chadash, that's the male form. Whereas ruach has a feminine noun. So ruach chadasha. So what's interesting about it is because we talked about the Holy Spirit, we talked about ruach hakodesh. It's actually feminine. So ruach is chadasha. That's why it says lev chadash veruach chadasha. So you don't see, but you don't see it in the English translation, but it does remind us that is a feminine noun. It's conjugated that way. So it's a beautiful phrase. I guess it could be translated as, instead of get yourself, what's the translation you have, Reverend Lynn? Instead of it says get. Vasulachem, verse 31. And then it says, and get yourself a new heart, or make yourself, create for. Okay. Mary, what does King James say? Do you have it?
Make yourself a new
Yeah.
heart.
That's a little bit closer to what asu means, but asu, sometimes asa means to make or to do. It's not create. Bara is the Hebrew word for create. But asa is also, like we say, oseh shalom, make peace, create peace. Asu sometimes is translated in the Bible as get. It seems to be that, but it's not get in the sense of take or possess or own or buy, which is lakach or kana to purchase. Or lakach is yeah, it's not that. It's asu definitely has a sense of either make or get or do. So there's a sense in here that I don't think get means almost like you could pick it up and
Doesn't
buy it.
Jeremiah speak of also?
Oh yeah. Yeah. He also speaks of the uncircumcised heart, right? He's one of the writers who talks about that we have in Deuteronomy, that phrase, uncircumcised heart. This one is literally a new heart, which is not, I don't know that Ezekiel mentions an uncircumcised heart. I can't even remember. I don't think so. But a new heart and a new spirit, which again, they're both there. I mean, it's really cool that it doesn't just say a new heart. It's again, lev should be translated as something like heart and mind. It's not just your emotions. It's your essence. That's your heart and mind working together. Your emotions, but also your brain too. Sometimes when we use the word heart in English in the sense of emotions, we almost talk about an irrational sense of love or sense of emotion, hate or whatever you want to say comes from your heart. But in the Bible, lev definitely has more of a sense of mind as well, of a rational space, not just a visceral or unthinking space. A place where our mind gets shut off. This is definitely ruach. Actually, maybe is more of that non-thinking energy necessarily, like it's just the animating energy, but lev has a sense of actually knowing what you're doing and making you, having yourself have a good attitude. And again, it finishes with it's not my desire that anyone will die. Repent and live. And that's the translation. Hashivu is pretty well. It actually therefore isn't really there. But it's repent and live. It's really just what it says. It doesn't say therefore. Repent and live. So that's where we left off. And we're continuing in these chapters here. We'll see how much we get to, but today we're going to be reading more of Ezekiel laying it out to Israel. So he's going to lay it out to them, and then he's going to turn on the other nations. A little different than Jeremiah, because Jeremiah does have those sections where he's laying it out on Israel and then he's laying it out on the nations. But Jeremiah, it's actually laid out, 5 or 6 chapters on, 8 chapters on Israel, then chapters on the Gentile nations, and then there's a flip, and then there's hope for Israel, and then there's hope for the Gentile nations. So his is much more organized, and Jeremiah's, as we said, was definitely edited, and there's sections that go here and there's sections that go there, but the sections are not. You got here just in time, John. We just did the intro. So we got you didn't miss the text, but this is much more organized in the sense that like we'll have these chapters, and then we're going to the chapters against the nations start in let me see if I can bring it up. No, I don't have it, but they'll probably be there next week. All right, so Rosemary, if you'd start in chapter 19 for us.
And you are to intone a dirge over the princes of Israel, and said, what a lioness was your mother among the lions, crouching among the great beasts, she reared her cubs.
And by the way, this metaphor or again, comparing Israel to a lion, or more importantly, a lioness, is interesting because again, this is a image of obviously a powerful animal, an animal that can definitely protect itself. And what's great about this is that, again, there are so many words for lions in the Bible. We actually have 3 of them right here. And so we can't really translate them other than saying great beasts. They translate the words as lioness, lion, great beast, and cubs. And the reason is that, again, obviously I love lions, so I'm just going to show you. No, actually, all 4 words. Sorry, all 4 words for lions are in this one line. So, the first is lavi, which they translated as lioness. The next is ariot, which are lions. Ari, right? That's the word that a lot of people know. The name Ari. So that's lavi, Ari. Kfirim, which they translate as beasts, kfir, and gur. All 4 words for lions are in one line. Now, again, in Hebrew, they can use them as synonyms and they have different words, and it works poetically. For English translation, what do? Translate as one is lioness, one is lions, one is great beasts, and one is cubs. But all of those 4 are words for lions, synonyms in some cases, right? And they don't necessarily indicate feminine or masculine lions. But the construct is clearly talking to the princes of Israel, right? Nasi, the princes or princes. The word Nasi today in Hebrew is also the Hebrew word for the president of Israel. The Rosh HaMemshalah is the prime minister, the head of the government. A Nasi is the word that we use for prince. Nasi is not literally like just a prince whose father is a king. It's a bad translation in the sense that maybe even have a note there. Kings who reigned after Josiah, that's who they're talking about, but that's not really what the point is. Yes. So
I just got through reading The Lioness with Golda Meir, and I'm picturing her doing this,
So they called her that, right? They called her as one of her nicknames, the Lioness of Judah. But the lion is obviously an important image for Israel, for Judah, for the country, but the modern country of Israel uses it too. And I'll show you why. You know this actually. So first of all, there's a kibbutz in the northern part of Israel that's called Kibbutz Lavi, which means the kibbutz of the lions. But it's also was the name of one of Israel's prototype military aircraft that they didn't use, but they developed a Lavi fighter. The word Ari, that's obviously Arik Sharon, or there's a lot of Aris or Ariels that are known in Israel. It's a very common name. The next word is kfir, which was also the lion cub or lion, which is the name of Israel's version of the F-16. F-14, was called a kfir. And it's also a very popular name for boys, or was a popular name for boys in Israel. It's less popular today. And Gur is Ben Gurion. David Ben Gurion, whose name was David Green back in Europe, changed his name to Gurion because it means the son of a lion. And so this was an important image for modern Israel to again, give promote a sense of strength, a sense of connection to the Bible, but also to draw on these images. So we love lions in the Bible. And this is interesting because the image of them is not just of strength, but of the way they protect their cubs, which I thought was a really interesting idea, because we normally think of like, well, you're talking about the lions as the king of beasts because they are big and they can kill other animals. No, this is because they protect their children, which is a great image too, for, again, a person who was called the lioness of Israel, Golda Meir. So but again, these metaphors are for specifically the kings of Israel who came out of after Josiah. These were Josiah's kids, who we know didn't turn out so great. Yeah.
She raised up one of her cubs. He became a great beast. He learned to hunt prey. He devoured people. Nations heeded the call against him. He was caught in their snare. They dragged him off with hooks to the land of Egypt.
Yeah, so again, you can see that this is what happens to Jehoiakim when he makes an alliance with the Egyptians.
When she saw herself frustrated, her hope defeated, she took another of her cubs and set him up as a great beast. He stalked among the lions. He was a great beast. He learned to hunt prey. He devoured people. He raped their widows, laid waste their cities. The land and all in it were appalled at the sound of his roaring. Nations from the countries round about arrayed themselves against him. They spread their net over him. He was caught in their snare. With hooks, he was put in a cage. They carried him off to the king of Babylon and confined him in a fortress, so that never again should his roar be heard on the hills of Israel.
And that's Jehoiakim, his son, who got, as we read, Jeconiah, got taken away in exile to Babylonia. I mean, it's not like, who are they talking about? They just told you the guy got taken back to Babylon. It's not like hard to figure out because they
This is Egypt.
oh no, that's the first one. The first one is Egypt. That's the one in verse 4.
Right.
The one in verse 8. So Jehoiakim is the one who got taken to Egypt. Jehoiachin or Jeconiah, he gets taken to Babylon. So all of just Josiah's sons and grandsons, because Jeconiah was one of the grandsons, was a grandson, was Jehoiakim's son. His uncles were the other kings. They all end in defeat. Clearly they're not great people. I mean, the Bible is not Ezekiel here, and there's nothing about these people that are good other than they were ours, but they're not good people. People are not happy with them. They're not happy with the nations aren't happy with them. We're not happy with them. They're not good people.
Your mother was like a vine in your blood, planted beside streams with luxuriant boughs and branches, thanks to abundant waters. And she had a mighty rod fit for a ruler's scepter. It towered highest among the leafy trees. It was conspicuous by its height, by the abundance of its boughs.
So let's look, let's just see if there's any, all of these are just commentaries on this imagery, which is again, now it's a tree with branches. Okay.
But plucked up in a fury, she was hurled to the ground. The east wind withered her branches. They broke apart and dried up, and her mighty rod was consumed by fire. Now she is planted in the desert, in ground that is arid and parched. Fire has issued from her twig-laden branch and has consumed her boughs. She is left without a mighty rod, a scepter to rule with. This is a dirge, and it has become a familiar dirge.
Familiar is one way to translate it. What's the translation you have, Reverend Lynn? In the last line, 14, it says dirge, a familiar dirge. What does yours say?
A lamentation.
But it says a familiar lamentation.
No, it is a lamentation and has become a lamentation, which doesn't do much.
Yeah, no, that. Mary, what's the King James?
It says, this is a lamentation and shall be for a lamentation.
It's a little better, but again, it is a lamentation, and it shall be for a lamentation, FOR. But I think what's interesting is that you can see Ezekiel's very rich imagery that he's using, lions and trees and all these different kinds of imagery that he brings to life. You can see the images come to life in your mind as he's telling us these. But what's interesting about it again is that his language is also really powerful, because He's saying, yeah, it's almost like he's saying it's a lamentation, it's a dirge, and it's going to keep being a dirge. So I don't love the word familiar there, because it's like, that means like, oh, you know it. It's almost like you're gonna know it. Tehi means it shall be, which is why the King James translated it shall be for a dirge. But really, I think the translation or the intention here is it's a dirge and you're going to know this dirge. It's not going away, which is a terrible imagery right now in my head, which is you're hearing it and you're going to continue to hear it. It's not going away. So that phrase right there, kinahi, but tehiki lakina. I mean, the word kina is dirge or lamentation, and they didn't use different words for it. You could have. There's slightly different words for kina, but that's what we call the book of Lamentations. We call it a kina. It's the word echa is what we say in Hebrew is the word for Lamentations, but a kina is the keynote are the lamentations or dirges that are like when we talk about the book of Lamentations, we say it's full of these things. It's the keynote. We call them keynote, and they were used for. There were other dirges too that were in the Bible, that are in the Bible, that, and the word in Hebrew is kina or keynote. It's the plural. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, mine says,
Yep.
your mother was like a vine in a vineyard.
And there's no dam, there's no blood.
Transplanted by the water, fruitful and full of branches, by reason of abundant water.
It's weird. Mary, what does yours say?
Chapter 10,
Verse 10. Yeah.
thy mother is like a vine in thy blood, planted by the waters.
So they just took out the word dam completely. They didn't have the word blood at all.
There is a note here, in your blood.
Well, it's there. I mean, so the word, the word gofen or geffen is used here. So the word, it's the only word there. Pre is used there too, which is fruit. Anafa is the branches. But the word geffen is what they translate as vine. It's definitely, the imagery is definitely vines and fruits and branches. But what's weird is the word dam, that they didn't translate it at all. It's a weird word in the midst of that, but it is there. I mean, the word dam, you just can't ignore it. So what does it mean? A mother was like a vine in your blood? I mean, you could understand it as your mother. She was your roots. It's not. I mean, I guess you could say your roots from your mom. Your mom was like a tree planted by there. That's where you started. That's where your origins are. And they were well watered. And it could have been good. It should have been good, right? It was good. And the tree got messed up. Now, most likely, I mean, you can kind of see it. There might be a commentary actually in one of your books. This whole chapter is about the kings that took over. This is about Josiah's line. So this isn't, these rods are these references. I mean, when they talk fit for a ruler's scepter, they're talking about kings, that came from here. So it matches up with what the stuff about the lion cubs, right? So this is lion cubs and it's imagery of trees. But I mean, I don't know that the word blood adds a lot to it, which is why they took it out, maybe because it was confusing, but it's definitely talking about their It,
I like oath.
what? There, it's saying this was where you should have been. You should have been by the waters, becoming a large and healthy tree, and instead you're done. And you've been taken into exile, which is you've been now planted in the desert, and fire has come out and consumed this. I mean, and there's nobody left. There's no rod, there's no scepter left. So there's nobody left. There's the tree, which is the house of David. This isn't the only imagery. We actually read one already with Ezekiel comparing this to the shoot or the root or the branch of David. Tzemach David is used all the time. It's still used in Jewish tradition. When we talk about the root of Jesse or the branch of David, we still use those words, and we still use this imagery of a staff being a symbol of rule, and to some extent, this connection of David's kingship to having life or death. I'll show you one of the famous versions of this. This one you might know of. So there's a tradition that Joseph had a staff, right? Joseph being Jesus's father. And this is, maybe even again, what some of the staff is connected to. But in all seriousness, I mean, this St. Joseph staff, you see this image, well, this is definitely Mormon, because
Bishops carry staffs.
oh no, it's not. This isn't a Mormon one, but you can see Joseph's staff, right? Notice what it is, it's flowering. So this midrash of St. Joseph's staff, it's not coming off of there, but yeah, I mean, it's an imagery that's still used. So the Tzemach David is it's still connected to Jesus in that imagery as well. So this is what's this scepter, which is really a tree branch, but is a symbol of life. It's kind of weird because it's not like you don't go, well, it's a staff that's like a Egyptian or maybe like even a staff you'd see like in some kind of movie with a king holding up a scepter that's ornamented. It's actually partly amazing because it's alive, and shouldn't be alive, right? The staff shouldn't be alive. It's been separated from the tree. So that's why the imagery of it coming back to life, or again, Tzemach David, the branch of David, well, that's why it was called the Branch Davidians. That's why the Waco, Texas people called themselves Branch Davidians, because they believed that they were off the Tzemach David. They were the branch of David. So that's where it comes from. I mean, that's where that terminology comes from. All right, so let's take a look at Ezekiel talking to his people in exile. This is an interesting little story. Well, it's not quite a story, but it gives you a little background. Yeah.
In the 7th year, on the 10th day of the 5th month, certain elders of Israel came to inquire of God and sat down before me. And the word of God came to me. O mortal, speak to the elders of Israel and say to them, thus said the sovereign God, have you come to inquire of me? As I live, I will not respond to your inquiry, declares the sovereign God.
So the people in exile come to Ezekiel, assumedly because they want answers, right? And so they know that he's a prophet, and this shows that they know that he's a prophet, right? So they know that he has the potential to tell them things that God wants them to tell them. Well, God's just told them, I'm not going to talk to you, which is not a great way to start. You think at this point, well, that's not a good beginning. Well, let's take a look what happens.
Arraign them, O mortal. Declare to them the abhorrent deeds of their ancestors. Say to them, thus said the sovereign God, on the day that I chose Israel, I gave my oath to the stock of the house of Jacob. When I made myself known to them in the land of Egypt, I gave my oath to them. When I said, I, the Eternal, am your God.
Right, which is what God said at the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai, right? Right there, Ani Adonai Elohechem, I am the Lord your God. I am your God. Notice, by the way, God said, I'm not going to talk to him, and then starts talking. This is like, you know.
It sounds like an argument in a marriage.
Okay, I'm done talking to you, and now I'm going to tell you exactly what.
I'm not speaking to you, and this is why.
And this is why. And I'm going to tell you everything you did wrong. So you asked for it. They did. They literally asked for it. They came and asked for it, an answer, and this is what they're going to get. Not a very happy message from God. Well, you know that. I mean, they're in exile. Here's what happens.
That same day, I swore to them to take them out of the land of Egypt into a land flowing with milk and honey, a land that I had sought out for them, the fairest of all lands. I also said to them, cast away every one of you the detestable things that you are drawn to, and do not defile yourselves with the fetishes of Egypt. I, the Eternal, am your God.
By the way, that's an interesting one, because usually they talk about the detestable Canaanite stuff. You know, they talk about all the idols that were seemingly Canaanite in origin. Here, it's Egyptian gods that he's, you know, that God is specifically upset with. And again, here we have the word again, hashlichu, cast away. So this is the same phrase, but now it's not cast away your sins, but cast away the detestable things of the Egyptians. That's the Egyptians, right? That's what it says. So you defiled yourself with them.
But they defied me and refused to listen to me. Not one of them cast away the detestable things that they were drawn to, nor did they give up the fetishes of Egypt. Then I resolved to pour out my fury upon them, to vent all my anger upon them there in the land of Egypt. But I acted for the sake of my name, that it may not be profaned in the sight of the nations among whom they were, for it was before their eyes that I had made myself known to Israel, to bring them out of the land of Egypt.
So guess what? You understand what just happened, Rosemary? They're talking about what happened before they even left Egypt.
Yes.
Now, what's interesting is that here they said, I told him in Mount Sinai, right? I am the Eternal, your God. They're saying, oh no, this is even when they were in Egypt. In Egypt, they were worshiping Egyptian gods. And so to some extent, it's reminding them, this goes back before you even step foot in the land of Israel. You've been worshiping other gods. And what God just did is he made an excuse for them. He said, okay, they were in Egypt. Can't be responsible for that because that's all that was in front of them. And I should have been fed up with them then, right? But he says, I acted for my name, right? Laman Shemi, which we have a lot in the prayers too. God, act for your name's sake, right? So here's what it happens.
I brought them out of the land of Egypt, and I led them into the wilderness. I gave them my laws and taught them my rules, by the pursuit of which humans shall live. Moreover, I gave them my Sabbaths to serve as a sign between me and them, that they might know that it is I, God, who sanctify them. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not follow my laws, and they rejected my rules, by the pursuit of which humans shall live. And they grossly desecrated my Sabbaths. Then I thought to pour out my fury upon them in the wilderness and to make an end of them. But I acted for the sake of my name, that it might not be profaned in the sight of the nations before whose eyes I had led them out.
Same phrase, right? I acted for the sake of my name. And again, we know that Moses actually says that to God. What will you do? What will happen to your reputation if you destroy these people? People are going to think you're not a very good God.
Correct.
Yes, that's your bad for your PR, which is what acting in your name means. My name. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And then he goes on to say that the house of Israel rebelled against me. Does that mean that God doesn't consider anyone outside of Israel?
Well, that's an interesting phrase, because it says, I gave them my laws and taught them my rules by the pursuit of which humans shall live. It doesn't actually say they would live or Jews would live or Israel would live. It says Ha'adam. That's fine. That's humans. It doesn't matter. However, you're going to translate Adam, it's not Jews. It's not Israelites. It actually says, I gave them my laws and taught my rules by the pursuit of which humans shall live. So it's an interesting point you bring up, John, because the phrase actually implies it's not just for Jews. They got it, but it's rules for everybody.
But everybody wasn't listening.
They weren't listening. His own people weren't listening.
I understand, but not just that subset. Everybody else on the planet.
Correct. But God's own people, the one that he did miracles for. So you can see where this is going. God says in Egypt, they were worshiping other gods. In the wilderness, they weren't paying attention. They weren't doing what they should be doing. Now, he could have said, hey, they worship the golden calf in the desert still. They were still worshiping these gods, even when we left. But he doesn't really hold them accountable for that. He says when they were in the wilderness, they weren't following Shabbat. They weren't following the rules that I had just given them at Mount Sinai, whatever. Now they have the rules. So here in Egypt, they're not doing the right things not so much because they're not following the rules. They don't have the Torah yet. So you can maybe hold them not responsible for that, but they're not worshiping me. They're worshiping Egyptian gods. So that, number one, that's what they're doing there. In the wilderness, the worship isn't the issue, though it could have been. Instead, they focus on their behavior and the fact that they weren't keeping Shabbat. They're in the wilderness, by the way. And I just want to say it's not just Shabbat, but he seems to be focused on Shabbat. He uses that as an example that they didn't keep Shabbat even there. And yeah.
But I might be missing something, and so just
No, Shabbat is the thing that's unique to the Jewish people.
You know what? You can actually make that argument, because when he's talking about the general rules, he says by the pursuit of which humans shall live. And then he goes into the Shabbats. Moreover, I gave them Shabbats as a sign between me and them. So you can make the argument that Shabbat was for them. Yeah.
But that's my point.
No, wait, hold a second. Hold it. Whoa. Verse 13 says, I gave them my rules and Shabbat by the pursuit of which, again, humans shall live. They use the words humans there, not just Jews.
What prophet?
Mhm.
What vehicle was used to educate non-Jews?
At this time?
So you can say I gave them my laws, but you show me some. Like I said, correct me. So it's okay if let me rephrase that. I understand the communication.
Yep.
To the Jews and the chosen people, right? After Noah, after the whole thing. I get that, right? But now show me the education of the Egyptians or whoever else was on the planet, that there were these rules that God who created the world had given them.
So what's your real question then?
But my point is, he says that I gave them my laws,
But who's gonna take the laws?
So,
No.
but how would they know?
No, I know when you talk to me, I get it, right? Ezekiel, you're
Yeah.
talking to me. But Ezekiel's not talking, or all the other prophets, I don't see them talking to the other people other than the Jews.
Okay, so here's that's an interesting question of what the Jewish role is in the
How
world.
do I know the law? Nobody's ever told.
So that's an interesting question. So there's always been a debate within the Jewish community is when the Torah says you're supposed to be a light unto the nations, is that because you're literally supposed to encourage people to follow these traditions, or are the laws really for you? And then if other people follow them, great, but they're really only for you. There is to this moment, there is debate amongst the Orthodox of what that actually means. So there are Orthodox Jews who believe that only Jews are responsible for the mitzvot, and as long as Gentiles keep what were called the Noahide laws, these 7 laws that they're supposed to keep, then that's cool. Jews have done their job by educating people on those 7 Noahide laws. There are other people who are more, I guess, more I guess it's a broader interpretation. I don't know if it's stricter really, because it's hard to say that literally at some point everyone's supposed to keep Shabbat. Everybody is supposed to keep the laws of the Torah. So there are people who believe that too.
That's
So
today.
right. So here's the problem. 2,000 years ago, if we step back 2,000 years, before there's Christianity, before there's Islam, there's only pagan religions and Judaism when it comes, or in the mind of Jews, there's only pagan religions.
At that immediate split.
2,000 years.
it's Judaism.
2,000 years ago, the only religion that's
Gotta go,
that's
bye.
What?
Bye.
Bye. The only religion that's, take care, Mary. The only religion that's preaching monotheism at that point is Judaism, right? So at that point, 2,000 years ago, even then there's debate amongst Jews, because we have it in the Talmud, whether they have to follow the rules or they don't have to follow the rules. My guess is the Jews at the time, 2,000 years ago, who said only the Jews have to follow the rules, really don't care about anybody else, honestly.
So no priests, the rabbis were educating.
Most likely, yes. Most likely they were priests and really didn't care about those other people. I mean, we don't know that for sure. That's the rabbi's take on it. But we get the impression that the priests really didn't care, or maybe a lot of Jews didn't care. We don't really know. We do know that there were some Jews, especially the rabbis or the Pharisees or the proto-rabbis, that are saying, no, these rules are for everybody. And they're going around the world converting people to Judaism and spreading the word. How do we know? Because the Christian Bible says so. The Christian Bible actually says the Jews are going around the world preaching Judaism. They make fun of it. So there were Jews that were actually engaging in teaching people. Once Christianity became the religion of the Roman Empire, that was forbidden. Done. It wasn't like the Romans woke up one day and said, no longer will Judaism be allowed to be taught. There was a time for the last 200 years before Constantine where Judaism and Christianity were under the gun, where, as you know, Christians were being thrown to the lion, and Christians were engaged in active proselytization of everyone. And the Romans were sick and tired of it and turned on them and started killing them and killed a lot of Christians. The persecutions of the Christians went all the way up almost to Constantine's time. They were still killing Christians. Jews were lumped into that together. And to some extent, they were becoming less active proselytizing because Christianity was much more successful proselytizing. But once the Roman Empire became Christian, it became illegal for Jews to proselytize. It was no longer allowed. Christianity prohibited it. But as I said, it's not so much that they just woke up and said, you can't teach Judaism anymore. Judaism itself was not, the Romans didn't want it practiced either. So it was almost like all they had to say was, well, now we can teach Christianity, but we're not teaching Judaism. We're still not teaching Judaism. Maybe they became I'm not trying to let the church off the hook on this. I'm not saying it for that reason, but I do think that they became a little bit more like, okay, well, this is now the religion of the empire. That's the old religion. And we really don't want to hear from that anymore. And they definitely made it hard. And some Christian Byzantine emperors made it really hard. Some of them were a little bit more tolerant, but Judaism no longer became a proselytizing religion. So it was over.
That period was very short.
Very short.
So 11 really should say, I gave them my laws, taught them my rules, by the pursuit of which Jewish humans should live, or it should say by which humans should live, but I didn't do a very good job educating all the other people besides Jews. No, but I'm making a joke, but really, I understand, or Ezekiel did a bad job interpreting what God was saying.
No, the guy, we have to assume that he says what,
Listen, if people, if Christians or Jews take every word that's written here for verbatim, right? Then I need to know.
okay, so for the last 2,000 years, Judaism, keeping that in mind, Judaism for the last 2,000 years has actively protected itself by saying, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't go out and proselytize. Now, has that created a sense that they don't have to? Or is it that there's a sense of Jewish superiority that we don't want anyone else to, we're part of a club and we don't need to do that anymore?
That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. My point is that that's not what I meant at all. What I meant was, and we can move on. I don't need to go down this route.
No.
My point.
It's a good question.
My point is if God says I taught humans the laws and how they shall live, it doesn't mean just Jewish humans.
I would agree with you.
Which means that non-Jews weren't educated, or the Jews failed their responsibility to educate them.
But don't the Noahide laws sort of make fellow travelers?
I think at least some Jews accept that. So,
And I didn't have to do with conversion, just the educational law. I mean, I'm an American. I'm not converting to Americanism because I follow, criminal law and civil law, right? There was no criminal or civil law back there. There was just human law, right? So that's my point. And we can move on.
no, but I think it's an interesting question. It's an interesting phrase. And so, look, the interesting thing about this too, is that Jesus's disciples and the people who came out of the church in the early days picked up Jewish proselytizing practices that already existed. And so the idea that Jews were actively sailing around the world, converting people to Judaism is a fact. And so what we have to understand is that Christianity built on that. Judaism became, for various reasons of self-protection, became antithetical to it. So it's tough for us. So I say, if you go back 2,000 years, maybe we can try to understand what it was like the last time that this has happened. I find it to be an interesting question because it's an interesting question for me, John, because it's actually, we're not thinking about it the last couple of weeks, but in the future of Judaism and what Judaism will mean, this issue of active proselytization is one of the more interesting aspects of what the Jewish community will look like or could look like. Who are the most active Jewish proselytizers in today's world?
College chaplains.
Yeah, but Jewish proselytizers. You think Jews? The most active
Chabad.
Jewish proselytizers in today's world, the only people who actually take it seriously, is Chabad. They're the only ones. But they're only interested in working with Jews. They'll tell you that in a humble and not mean way. They'll say, look, our job here is not to reach Christians. Will they turn away a convert? Well, they will in the term of turning them away, making it difficult, which is what you're, again,
They're proselytizing.
but they're only proselytizing to Jews. And that's the issue. If a non-Jew accepts or wants to go through Chabad and go through Orthodox conversion, they will allow it. It's not like
Jews who need conversion.
they're looking for Jews to bring them into Judaism, but they're not looking to bring non-Jews into Judaism. They have outposts everywhere. And none of those outposts are actively engaged in proselytizing to non-Jews. Now, to some extent, that's because they don't believe that that's their mission. The Rebbe, the last Hasidic Rebbe of the Chabad dynasty, told the people that your job is to work with the Jewish community. It's also, again, to be a light to the nations. You should have good behavior, you should have good relations with your local governments, which is why Chabad has a great relationship with America, and they also have a great relationship with Putin, and they have a great relationship with Zelensky, and they have a great relationship everywhere because they're not taking sides. They're literally whatever government that they're there, they're doing the old Jewish route, which was you make friends with whoever is in power, and you're not looking for the bigger statement. Yes.
My one last thing.
Yep.
You know, we diverged off proselytization, but that wasn't that was not my point.
No, but it's a good point.
I
So,
brought them out of the land. Okay, I brought them, Jews, right? I
Yep.
brought them
Yep.
out of the land of Egypt, and I led them, Jews, into the wilderness.
Yep.
Okay, fine. 11, I gave Jews my laws, right?
yes.
I gave them,
Yep.
Jews, my laws.
Yep.
And I taught Jews my rules.
Yep.
By the pursuit of which a human should live.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
So.
That's the point. You brought out that point, John, which is it doesn't say Jews will live, it says humans.
Says human
Yep.
and them. So my point is the translation.
It's not a translation. It's not a translation.
Hearing what God was.
No, Ezekiel might have been opening it up to this debate of whether these rules are for everybody.
Or just-
Eventually, are they a rule for everybody? Are they just for the Jews?
Or do these make one human?
Well, good, but then shouldn't all humans be human?
Yes.
Or does God consider people that don't follow the rules other than you?
But we know the word Adam means human. That's why they translate it as human. Adam, Adam. That's the name for Adam, the first human. Every human is an Adam. There is an understanding that that's every human, which is why it's translated as humans. It's translated as man. There's no question. It is not Israelite.
Did nobody out there in internet land catch that?
Well, we did, and then we looked at it and it said, it's also here. It's also with the laws. That's why we said, specifically, Rosemary said Shabbat is for Jews. And I said, it actually says right here, right after Shabbat, it says that the rules are so that humans will live. It's in verse 13 too. So it doesn't seem to be that it's just for Jews. It seems like Shabbat and these other laws are for everybody.
Oh, Shabbat. Therefore, humans will live.
Well, that's another issue. That's another issue, Reverend Lynn, which is that there are Jews who believe that if we don't follow the rules, the whole world falls apart, which is that the other people don't have to have those rules, but if we don't follow the rules, then the whole world falls apart. So it's on us.
Falls apart because everybody doesn't know the rules, because one group of people didn't do a good job teaching.
I will tell you, it's difficult to know the answer from this.
You, in modern times, do you have the authority, do you have the responsibility? I mean, Reverend Lynn is here to open up a Torah study to everybody to come in, and we need to study this and
Yes, which is why it's out on Facebook right now. No, I mean, look, it is. It's our job. I believe it's our job. What?
Christian exceptionalism is dangerous. American exceptionalism, Jewish exceptionalism
Is dangerous. It's correct.
Just as dangerous.
Correct. And that's why John, that's why I have to interpret that to be that it's for everybody. Because if I don't, then I wind up with that. And I will tell you that I've had this argument with people who are, I had an argument with a Chabad rabbi years and years ago, where they came to, because, and I admire Chabad's commitment for outreach, and they're the only ones that will go to Nepal and establish a Jewish outpost for Jewish hikers and Israelis that are in Nepal, hiking a mountain. They're the only people doing that. But the problem is that their lack of understanding and their commitment to Jewish exceptionalism is problematic to me. And that's where I have a problem. So this is what happened. Because what underlies this is that Jewish people have a spark, what they call a pintel yid, which is a Hasidic tradition, which is the Jews have this spark of divinity. Now, there's a question of, does everyone have that spark. And again, that's why I don't like the word pintel because a pintel literally means a point of energy in a person who's Jewish. A yid is a Jew, right? Pintel is the Yiddish word for this. So they'll say, yeah, but everyone has that spark, but the Jewish spark is just a little bit brighter. So I said, well, so here's how it came out. So they're talking about this pintel and I know that. And so they talk about it. And one of the holidays they really love talking about this. When do we talk about light? Hanukkah, right? It's a great time to talk about the light. So they talk about light. It's a metaphor. There's lights. There's the Hanukkah lights. There's the candle. All that stuff. So we had a Chabad. Chabad does these mobile lessons. So they do a matzah factory, matzah baking factory that they open up to kids, and they also did this one where they came to the schools, and this was when I was at Heschel in Agora. They came out and they did a mobile, really cool, they're very good at interactive stuff. They did a mobile making olive oil. They did an olive press, and they showed the olives, how they press the olives and they get the oil out, and then they redo it and they show how they would get the oil out. And the oil separates, right? And so they brought out oil that had just been made, that had separated, and then you have to take out the oil and let the water part. You have to let that part out because that's not good for fuel. It ruins your candles, your fuel. So you get rid of the water, you layer it out, and the oil, but you have to let it. And so the guy said, I remember him telling the kids, he says, well, I'm bringing out this oil. This is oil that's already been settled. So you can see the oil and the water. And so that takes time. It takes time to have that happen. But you see the oil rises to the top. And the guy says right in front of these kids, it's like the Jewish people. We rise to the top. You mix us up, but we still rise to the top. Yeah. So when the guy was done, I walked out, I said to the guy, I said, listen, I said, you have people here. That message, I don't like that message, but I'm telling you right now, that message that you just said to a group of kids, some of them who have Christian parents or parents that aren't Jewish, is completely out of bounds, and it was inappropriate. And if you're ever going to come back here, you're never going to say that again. Because that is I know that's one of your teachings, but you won't teach that here. Otherwise you can't come back. I said, because you basically just told these kids that their own family aren't good. Does that make sense to you? Because, because I know that if I just say, hey, look, Jewish people are not better than anyone else, they're not going to, that they're going to laugh at me and they're saying, blah, blah, But when I tell people, when I put it into the context of you've just told kids that their parents aren't exceptional, or they're not, I didn't say exceptional, but that they're not as good, that they're rising to top, you're actually creating family, you're actually creating a situation where children are going to disrespect their parents. They're going to go back and tell their parents that they're not as good as the Jewish people. Well, you've literally created a situation where they're violating one of the 10 commandments. So I knew that would make sense to them and maybe resonate. And sure enough, now I said that without hearing anything. One of the kids came up to me afterwards. One of these kids who has a parent who wasn't Jewish, his dad's Greek. And the kid heard the rabbi say to them, this is when the Jews beat the Greeks 2,000 years ago. The Greeks were horrible people, took away our rights and, tried to make us assimilate and try to take away our traditions. These were the Greeks. And the kid said to me, my dad's Greek. So I had to give the kid, I think he was probably 7 or 8. I had to give them, like a history of Greece and you're not the same Greeks. These were, and I said, it's the Greek Syrians, like the Greek Syrians were, whatever. There's Greek Egyptians, Greek Syrians, they were mixtures of, like I had to make sure he didn't go home and say to his dad, you're a Greek, you persecuted our people. But that wasn't even the point of what this guy said. And so then I ran out and I said, he was still packing up his stuff. I said, and another thing, you got to be careful when you talk about Greeks that you make sure that it's not the Greeks who live today. You can talk about Greeks who lived thousands of years ago who were called them Syrian or Syrian Greek or whatever, but I don't even know if I said, just use the word Syrian, but the Greek armies of Alexander the Great are not the Greeks who live there today, not least of which is that most of the Greeks today are Slavic or descendants of tribes that came into that area, 800, 700 of the Common Era. But anyways, I just, that message of, well, Jews are better is still part of that mentality. And to counter it, you almost have to say, no, these rules apply to everybody. These don't just apply to us. They don't make us better people genetically or whatever, but they help us live. So it's a very good point. It's a point that that needs to be made. And
We made in many quarters.
yeah, and the consequence of thinking that these rules only apply to Jews can lead to this idea that, it doesn't matter. They're all garbage. These people are garbage anyways. And I'm telling you, that is the danger. And every time, Jews are victims of anti-Semitism, it increases that feeling of screw everybody else. Can't trust anybody else. These people are all, going to kill us. Or if they don't kill us, if given the right heat, if you turn up the heat a little bit, they'll kill us. So this is a problem. There's no question.
Church in Granite Hills, I have parishioners who brought their kids to me. They went to LA Baptist High School, and it was the same thing in reverse. Only Christians are.
Yeah.
This, that, and the mother brought the kids to me, so I could straighten them out. Because that's not what the church teaches.
Yeah, no, it's a tough one. It's a tough one because you understand where that theology comes from. You understand that that's an us or them situation, strengthens the community, by binding them together but that's what a cult does. That's the behavior of people that are trying to indoctrinate people for a war that we don't have to have. It's not a war that's helpful to the world at all. I mean,
You can argue in 10, 11, 12, and 13 that God and his prophets didn't do a very good job.
well, yeah, but you're focused on the fact that the people who have a responsibility to do this didn't do their job. I'm not saying you don't hold the leaders accountable. You're right. But Ezekiel is telling people, look, you know better. People have been telling you these rules. It's not like you didn't know what the rules were. So Shabbat, that was really stuck out. So the wilderness.
Shabbat mean anything other than Shabbat?
No, here clearly Shabbat means my Sabbaths. It says Shabbatai, my Shabbat, my Sabbaths, which is interesting because God's saying it's my day. It's not just your day, it's my day. And you violated my day. So it's not just Shabbat. It's not just you violated Shabbat, your Shabbat, my Shabbat. You've rejected my rules. You've rejected my Shabbat. So that's an interesting phrase too, that it says my Shabbat, not your Shabbat, my Shabbat. That's an interesting thing. So I didn't wipe you out in the wilderness. Yeah, here's what I did instead.
However, I swore to them in the wilderness that I would not bring them into the land flowing with milk and honey, the fairest of all lands that I had assigned to them, for they had rejected my rules, disobeyed my laws, and desecrated my Sabbaths. Their hearts followed after their fetishes. But I had pity on them and did not destroy them. I did not make an end of them in the wilderness. I warned their children in the wilderness. Do not follow the practices of your ancestors. Do not keep their ways, and do not defile yourselves with their fetishes.
Yep. And again, don't follow the practices of your ancestors. So, there's that warning. That don't be like them.
I, the Eternal One, am your God. Follow my laws and be careful to observe my rules, and hallow my Sabbaths, that they may be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I, the Eternal One, am your God.
Yeah. And again, Ani Adonai Elohechem, I, the Eternal, am your God. Follow my laws, right? And hallow my Sabbath. So that's definitely a theme in this, the laws and the rules. But again, seems very focused on Shabbat, which, by the way, is an interesting thing. You're speaking to already now an exilic community. This is a community that's living in exile. They're living in Babylonia. These are people that came to him in Babylonia. And you notice what he's saying, follow my laws, observe my rules. And so far, we're not even in the land of Israel, right?
Even in a foreign land.
Yep. And they're not even there yet. They're still in the wilderness.
But the children rebelled against me. They did not follow my laws and did not faithfully observe my rules, by the pursuit of which humans shall live. They profaned my Sabbaths. Then I resolved to pour out my fury upon them, to vent all my anger on them in the wilderness. But I held back my hand and acted for the sake of my name, that it might not be profaned in the sight of the nations, before whose eyes I had led them out. However, I swore to them in the wilderness that I would scatter them among the nations and disperse them through the lands, because they did not obey my rules, but rejected my laws, profaned my Sabbaths, and looked with longing to the fetishes of their ancestors.
So let's just read carefully because this is very clearly there. I swore to them in the wilderness that I would scatter them among the nations. So before they even came into the land of Israel, I told them that I would scatter them when they didn't follow my rules. And by the way, we're about to get to that in the book of Deuteronomy. Literally tomorrow night, we're going to read that section from Deuteronomy chapter 20, gets in chapter 26, where God says, I will scatter you amongst the nations. Now, if Deuteronomy was written while this was already happening, during the time of Josiah or very close to the Babylonian exile, when it was happening, it's easy to understand that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, or it's a prophecy that's being fulfilled as it's happening. Either it was written 600 years before, or it was written 100 years, or not even 100 years, 20 years before, 30 years before, and people see what's happening. How do they know that it's happening? Because it already happened to the northern kingdom 100 years before Judah was exiled, Israel was exiled. So this idea that there's a punishment that's coming through to you through exile, you're living it now. You're living it now, and your cousins and your relatives, your brothers and sisters that are still back in Israel are about to be exiled. But I warned this to you in the wilderness. You knew this before you even entered the land, that you would be scattered if you didn't follow the rules. So you knew about this. This was the part of the pact already.
Moreover, I gave them laws that were not good, and rules by which they could not live. When they set aside every first issue of the womb, I defiled them by their very gifts, that I might render them desolate, that they might know that I am God.
Yeah, so Sheldon, you just made a noise because, why?
Yes, because he's saying, I gave you bad laws.
Well, I gave you laws. It's not a great translation, because if you look at it, I delivered them into the hands of their temptation to stumble over the iniquity. I gave them rules that would make them fall. Now, that's a very strange idea. Again, it's really one where you almost have to say, did God set us up?
Yes.
Because at least the way that it's laid out here. What does it mean? This line from the Talmud. Following these statutes and laws led to sin, not to a mitzvah. Right? Or look at this section. Let's look at this section. Now, this one's only in Hebrew. Let me just see if this. No, this is not the best one here for. Let me just see if this is in English. No. Well, this is only interesting from the perspective of Jews trying to make sense of the laws. Why are the laws, the way they are? God gave us laws that were not good, not in the sense that they were bad, but they were laws that are indications of things not being good. Like, you're doing this because this is not the way things should be. That's a little bit of a different understanding. Let's just see if there's any other good.
That's how it's interpreted.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, let's just see if there's any other.
Or maybe they were tough. Maybe they worked for other universities, but not. for
Well, what does your translation say there, Reverend Lynn?
Well, I was reading the postscript here. It says, moreover, I gave them statutes that were not good and ordinances by which they could not have life. And I defiled them through their very gifts in making them offer by fire all their firstborn, that I may horrify them. I did it that they might know that I am the Lord.
So,
That's creepy.
yeah, so I think really what the intention of what Ezekiel is saying is that, I believe this is the intention of it. So, the Bible says that you're supposed to offer up the firstborn of everything you have. But the Bible is very clear that that doesn't mean you kill it, right? I mean, you do with your animals, right? The firstborn animal that you have, you offer up. But the firstborn son you have, you go through a process we know of pidyon haben, of redeeming them. It's possible that, again, what Ezekiel's talking about, it seems like, I think it's probable what he's talking about. Most biblical scholars say this is the case. What he's talking about is the fact that there were people who understood this law differently, which was, I'm not going to redeem my child. I'm going to offer him up as a sacrifice. Why? Because God says the firstborn issue of the womb shall be offered up. Now, the Bible says you're not supposed to do it, but it could be that people said, well, that's because people are weak. If you're really strong and you really love God, you offer up your kid. Why? Because everyone else offers up their kids. The Canaanites do. Other people offer up their kids. So God really does want us to offer up our kids. It's just most people aren't strong enough to do it. And so what Ezekiel is saying is, no, you really weren't supposed to offer up your kids, but people are following this rule. They're interpreting it themselves, and they're doing it. And they're actually killing themselves by doing it. What does he say? He says, you're literally killing yourselves. You're literally, when they set aside the first issue of their womb, they're killing themselves. They are rendering themselves desolate, which is, well, they translate it as guilty, but it's clearly talking about, the fact that if they offer up their children, then they're killing themselves. They're literally making sure that they can't procreate. So it could be that people were doing this. I mean, we know they were doing it. We know that the Bible says that they were offering up their children, which was the worst thing possible. So it could be that, again, Ezekiel God is saying here, they are turning these words into the very words that they're literally following this rule and offering up their children, which, again, seems to be the worst thing that they could do.
Reverend, why are you merging 25 and 26 together? There's so many other statements, there's so many other sentences that are so disconnected and disjointed. Why are you merging 25 and 26?
Well, I am, because the translation is. I mean, that when it says when, they're talking about it. I gave them the laws and the good rules which they could not live. Look, they don't even, that's a colon, man.
I see the colon, I see it.
And so they translated it. You're right. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be.
Period.
Could, yeah. It could be. And then the word when doesn't even have to be there. I mean, then it's just, they set aside.
Anyway,
It could be, but the translation leads to that. Let me just see if there's any other reason.
you know,
No.
the book that I have, the footnote says,
No.
this refers to an act of apostasy following the incident of the spies. And then Marathon.
Yeah.
One option is that since the people disobeyed.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
the law,
Yeah,
gave them bad laws instead, exemplified by child sacrifice.
yeah, that's the child sacrifice. That's what we're just talking about, the worst.
Alternatively, well, because it's merging 25 and 26, alternatively, some Israelites interpreted Exodus 22:28, which I've gone back to, as literally requiring the sacrifice of the first.
Yes, that's the Pidyon Haben. So whether people interpreted Pidyon Haben, I'll show you in a second. Yeah, well, let's take a look at it, since this is what we already mentioned it, but we'll look at the actual law. It's from Mishpatim, right after the Ten Commandments. So it says, 22, here it is, right here. No, wait, 22 what?
Which one are you looking at?
For the-
Exodus 22:28.
Yeah,
34:19.
so here you go. Wait, what is
You
it?
just stopped it, I
22,
think,
22:28.
other way.
22. Wait,
22:28.
I think I saw it the other way.
34:19.
Here, this one,
you
right?
shall give me the male firstborn among your children. You shall do the same with, right there. You shall give me the male firstborn among your children, right? Which again, the commentary is,
It's interesting, common law in England, you know, the first child, the second, the first son, the second son, and so forth, has specific roles they're supposed to. One goes to the church, one goes to the
Yep.
military, one goes to.
Yeah. Yeah, for us, the firstborn child is considered to be God's, but we understood it to be that, they're not sacrificed, right? But the Bible seems to, it's pretty clear, it's God's. But again, in Exodus earlier on in chapter 12, it tells us we do a ritual of redemption for the child. So the Bible definitely says that we redeem the child. We don't, here, I'll just go back really quick.
Give me your firstborn, but I don't look at it as sacrifice. I look at it as, maybe he becomes a priest, he becomes a rabbi, he becomes clergy, he becomes, I don't know. I don't look at it,
Well, remember, when the firstborn child lives in, when the firstborn child lives,
the next sentence about you should give the calves.
yes.
But you have to look at the time.
Yeah.
And so here's the,
Knowing that's how much we believe in you, well, I can't.
so here it says, consecrate to me every male firstborn, human and beast, a first male. This is Exodus 13, right after this is the night of Passover. Consecrate to me every firstborn, human and beast, the first male issue is mine, right? And so again, we have it in the Bible, but people took it literally. I mean, clearly, he's saying that people are taking it literally, that they were sacrificing their children. Again, we would say that the whole purpose of understanding this, again, here it's in context of the Egyptian firstborn, but that this is, we didn't sacrifice the children. We had to redeem the child. Now, the other part that you quoted, which is the story of the spies, what was it talking about there? It's an interesting midrash or explanation of the spy situation, which is that why did God command them to send spies? God knew what they were going to do. Why would God say send spies?
the same as a company sending somebody to check on.
The problem is that God knew that the spies were going to come back and give a report that would cause everyone to lose faith. So there's a real question of, did God do that to set the people up? Yeah. And the fact is that God knew that they were going to come back with a bad report and it was going to cause this kind of chaos. It doesn't really explain it because here's the thing. If God, this is where people are freaked out by the spies story, is why does God tell them to send in spies? If God's already told them it's all good, why set them up to have any kind of information that makes them scared? And so there is this feeling like God didn't need to do that. And so there's this whole discussion in the Bible that's not in the Bible, that's in the Midrash, which is that people argue with God and say, with Moses and say, we better send in spies. And then God goes, fine, send in spies. It doesn't say that, right? It doesn't, that conversation isn't exactly there. Okay. But here's where the confusion is. This is where the spy story is an interesting story, because it says in there that it says in here that, oh wait, I went too far. Next, these are when the spies get in. Okay, so Adonai spoke to Moses saying, send agents to scout the land, which I am giving to the Israelite people. So shlach lecha, literally send in the agents. Send in the scouts, or whatever you want to call them. That's what the Bible says. God said, send. So God commanded it, which is why, John, they say God sometimes commands things that are bad. That's where the spy story, because quite frankly, Deuteronomy tells a slightly different version of that story, which is when Moses is recounting what happens, here's what it says. Here it says, God said, go up and take possession of the land I'm giving you. He doesn't say that whole spy thing, was God's idea. God just told you to go in. God didn't tell you to send in spies. And it actually says something even more carefully there. I'm just looking at the way Moses tells the story. It says right here, yeah, it's God's, he's reminding him there, but there's actually a line where Moses basically says, I will find it, where he's basically reminding him that the whole spy thing was your idea, people.
My footnote says not with no notation for Deuteronomy or Exodus, but it says rather Jeremiah and Leviticus, but it says this sees the contradiction of the nature of God himself. One may interpret it as God's allowing his people to degenerate to this level so that they might conclusively learn his superiority to any man-made deity. These events, however, post-date the wilderness period.
So they're saying that it basically it explains the theological issue here, but it's from later on. That's their answer is if you want to if you want to look at that, then you've got to go earlier. Wait, hold on one second. Let me just see if I can find the Deuteronomy version of it, which again, slightly different than the way that's presented in Deuteronomy. Here it is. when you came to Kadesh Barnea, right? This is right at the beginning of Deuteronomy. God, go take possession of the land of God, your fathers, fear not and be dismayed. Then all of you came to me and said, let us send agents ahead to reconnoiter the land and bring back word en route, and we will happen. I approved of the plan, so I selected from you among the 12 participants, one from each tribe. I mean, that's a different version of the story, which seems to be that the people wanted it. So when in John's commentary, it says God commanded it, God commanded them to do something that was going to get them into trouble. So it's almost as, again, what are the rabbis looking for? An example of where God commands people to do something that is not good. And that's their example. It's an example in the Bible of people saying, hey, does God ever command us to do anything bad? And then that's it. God commanded us to do that. And again, if God didn't set us up for that, then God would have just said, fine, you want to send in spies? You send spies. I'm not having any part of it. But God says, shlach lecha, send spies. So this is where it's an example. I grant, I give you that it's not the greatest example of God, but that's the understanding that God is actually can command us to do things that are not good for us. The other possibility is, again, we're misinterpreting what God gave us a law that we can screw up with, which is the law of your children, of your not sacrificing your children, right? So that's all part of, this issue. Okay, so we're not done yet. We're in the wilderness. People are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I took them into a land. So what verse are we in there? Rosemary?
Scroll up a little. Okay, keep going.
No, we're still here. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, right
Right
there. Yeah, right here. Down a little. There. That's it. Now, O mortal, speak to the house of Israel and say to them, thus said the sovereign God, by this too your ancestors affronted me and committed trespass against me. When I brought them to the land that I had sworn to give them, and they saw any high hill or any leafy tree, they slaughtered their sacrifices there and presented their offensive offerings there. There they produced their pleasing odors and poured out their libations. Then I said to them, what is this shrine that you visit? Therefore, such a shrine is called Bama to this day.
Yeah. So now they're in the land of Israel, and now they're still screwing up. So in Egypt, in the wilderness, and now they're in Israel. And what are they doing in Israel? They are sacrificing in places they're not supposed to be sacrificing. And they're doing it all over the place. Every high hill, every leafy tree, they're sacrificing and bringing offensive offerings. Okay.
Now say to the house of Israel, thus said the sovereign God, if you defile yourselves as your ancestors did and go astray after their detestable things, and if to this very day you defile yourselves in the presentation of your gifts by making your children pass through the fire to all your fetishes, shall I respond to your inquiry, O house of Israel? As I live, declares the sovereign God, I will not respond to you.
Yeah. And so there it's very clear that they're making their children, they're making them offerings to these gods. So it's not.
Why God is not responding.
Yes. And so this is why you wound up in this situation. So again, it gets back to this stuff. So you were worshiping Egyptian gods there. You in the wilderness, you were not doing what you were supposed to be doing. And here in the land of Israel, again, you were not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Now, again, they're in exile now, but you understand the point. Wherever you go, you're continuing to do these things wrong.
And what you have in mind shall never come to pass when you say, we will be like the nations, like the families of the lands, worshiping wood and stone. As I live, declares the sovereign God, I will reign over you with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm and with overflowing fury. With a strong hand and an outstretched arm and overflowing fury, I will bring you out from the peoples and gather you from the lands where you are scattered. And I will bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, and there I will enter into judgment with you face to face.
Now, this seems to imply that there's still something still to be done, which is that God is going to have a relationship with them in the wilderness of exile, right? And what's interesting here is that we know that phrase, Yad Chazakah Vizra Netuyah. We say it all the time at Passover, right? When we hold up the shank bone and we say, this is the strong arm of God, right? This is the Zroah. That's what we call that piece, right? But the Yah Hazakah is strong arm in it. But now we have an extra thing, which is overflowing fury. Now you get overflowing fury. Shvucha is overflowing or abundant. What anybody have another translation besides overflowing? Chema is anger or fury. Wrath. You might have wrath. You have wrath in 34? Overflowing fury.
33.
Yeah, it's in both. It's in both. Shvucha.
From the peoples and gathering out of the countries where you were scattered with a mighty hand and outstretched arm and the wrath poured out.
Yeah, there you go. I said wrath. It's better than fury. Yeah, chema is the wrath or fury, and shvucha is overflowing, abundant shvucha. Yep, it's three things now, but that's very much like the way God led us out of Egypt. Except now it's to get us out of these areas where we were scattered. Yep. And I will enter into judgment with you face to face. Yeah. What does that mean?
As I entered into judgment with your ancestors in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so will I enter into judgment with you, declares the sovereign God. I will make you pass under the shepherd's staff, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant.
And so what have they done? They've gone back to square one. They've gone back to Egypt, not to the wilderness, but to the wilderness of Egypt. It's not the wilderness of the desert. It's in the land of Egypt. You've gone back. We're going back. We're starting back over, and I'm coming to you like that. What are you saying, Reverend?
I don't understand. I will make you pass under the shepherd's staff.
That's the pretty good translation. They use it as a image for counting them, right? I'll count you like sheep. The staff, like God is marking each one. But that's the word tachat hashevet, which means under the staff. Yep. And again,
Shepherd's staff, better, my translation is wrong.
yeah, but they note that the tachat hashevet is a way of counting the people as a sheep. Yeah. And so as God is doing this, God is making, taking account of everybody. So every one of these people who's there now.
The church uses that.
Yeah.
What's the church vernacular is a crozier.
Yeah.
Bishop walks with a crozier.
Yeah. The shepherd's staff. Yep. Which is
Church supposed to smack and
but this is definitely that each person is part of this, right? Each person counts in this. But again, it's like God is taking care of us like sheep. Yep.
I will remove from you those who rebel and transgress against me. I will take them out of the countries where they sojourn, but they shall not enter the land of Israel. Then you shall know that I am God.
Yeah. Take him out to where? They're not coming back, which means to some extent, what are they going to die in the wilderness again? Because they're not coming back into the land of Israel. They're not coming out. They And maybe we'll leave, but they're not going there. So God is going through another process of winnowing out people who aren't right. So this exile experience that you're living in right now is going to be a process. It's a crucible. It's another crucible where we're gonna leave behind people who aren't gonna make it. Yep.
As for you, O house of Israel, thus said the sovereign God, go, every last one of you, and worship your fetishes and continue if you will not obey me. But do not profane my holy name anymore with your idolatrous gifts.
So, it's almost as if God's saying, I don't, if you're not going to be a part, if you're not going to follow the rules, don't give me your gifts, don't pretend like you're still worshiping me.
For only on my holy mountain, on the lofty mount of Israel, declares the sovereign God, there in the land, the entire house of Israel, all of it must worship me. There I will accept them, and there I will take note of your contributions and the choicest offerings of all your sacred things.
Yeah, and again, make sure you're doing it at the right place. Make sure you're doing it in Jerusalem, the holy place, right? That's where I'm going to accept them.
When I bring you out from the peoples and gather you from the lands in which you are scattered, I will accept you as a pleasing odor, and I will be sanctified through you in the sight of the nations. Then, when I have brought you to the land of Israel, to the country that I swore to give to your fathers, you shall know that I am God.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it says, I will accept you as a pleasing odor, and I will be sanctified through you in the sight of the nations. You're the offering now. Yeah. You take a shower. You are the pleasing odor. I will tell you, you don't have a you're going to come back, right? So this is at least hope that you're going to come back. And part of my greatness will be the fact that you're going to come back.
There you will recall your ways and all the acts by which you defiled yourselves, and you will loathe yourselves for all the evils that you committed. Then, O house of Israel, you shall know that I am God when I deal with you for my name's sake, not in accordance with your evil ways and corrupt acts, declares the sovereign God.
Yep. And you can see what that means. That's the end of the declares Neum Adonai, right? But declares God. Again, that phrase, I will deal with you for my name's sake, for my reputation. I'm not going to deal with you the way you deserve to be dealt with. I'm going to deal with you because it's good for me, for you to be okay, for you to be good. But if I dealt with you the way you should be dealt with, it would not be good. And by the way, these last 44 verses, I wasn't talking to you. It all started with, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. And here's my 44 verses. And they're very powerful verses. Very parental. The whole thing was very parental. And it is spoken as a parent who's pretty fed up with their kid's behavior, but is like, you know what? I'll forgive you, but to some extent, I'm doing this for my reputation too, which is also very parental. So, yep. And it's going to reflect on me. And it's almost as God saying that. I mean, Moses was saying that before. Now God is saying it flat out. And God obviously agrees to that earlier on in Exodus, in the very beginning, when God's first confronted with our moaning and our whining and our idol worshiping, God says, essentially acquiesces to Moses by saying, yeah, for my name's sake, I won't do it. All right, so let's read a little bit more. We're going to, I don't know if we'll get all the way through chapter 21, But this one's an interesting one because this is, hold it one second. Let me just see if this, let me just see something here. So chapter 21. Let
It's
me,
interesting because, 21:1 in the Christian scripture is 20:45.
oh, it still continues in there. Interesting. No, this, yeah, no, this is still, these chapters are still just about Israel. I'm not sure why. Look, declares the word of whatever, Ne'um Adonai Adonai, which is the same phrase, the Lord God, sovereign God, whatever. But that's usually an indicator that's either like the end of the prophecy or the beginning of a new prophecy. But usually Ne'um Adonai that's what I said, is the end, comes at the end. God will start the prophecy here at the beginning, said the word of Vayehi Devar Adonai Alai, the word of God came to me, right? That's verse 2. So the first verse of chapter 20 is, it's telling us when it happened and the fact that people came to him and asked him for a prophecy. And if you look at verse 1, the word of the Lord came to me is the way of prophecy begins. Vayehi Devar Adonai Alai, which is the same phrase. So, I mean, I think this is the beginning of another prophecy. I mean, does it have to be another chapter? No, but 44 verses is a good length for a chapter. So, so this is another prophecy. And again, we'll at least, well, we'll take a look at chapter 21 because this, as we go through this chapter, you'll see it's set up as you'll see the structure's a little different than that one. But let's take a look. Let's look at it.
The word of God came to me. O mortal, set your face toward Teman and proclaim to Daram and prophesy against the brushland of the Negev.
So give me I guarantee you somebody else has a different translation. Reverend Lynn, what is your translation for, is this still chapter 20 verse?
Yes.
So what does this verse say? O mortal, Ben Adam.
Son of man, set your face toward the south, preach against the south, and prophesy against the forest land of the Negev.
Yeah. So not really sure why Darom is capitalized as a place rather than the south. Taman is definitely towards the south. It's towards Yemen. It's towards Saudi Arabia. Negev is the south. That's the southern part of Israel. It's still the southern part of Israel. The Negev is where, where Ben Gurion lived in the Negev in the part of the Israel that borders the Gaza. It's where Beersheba is the biggest city in that area. But it's speaking to the southern part of Israel, which definitely was the one was in most contact with the Edomites, with Edom, and with that kind of entry from people from Egypt or from that part if they're coming from that part of the world, they're coming up there. So again, I was pretty sure that your translation would not translate Darom and Taman as places, but as directions. And so it's towards the south. Here we go.
Say to the brushland of the Negev, hear the word of God. Thus said the sovereign God, I am going to kindle a fire in you, which shall devour every tree of yours, both green and withered. Its leaping flame shall not go out, and every face from south to north shall be scorched by it. Then all flesh shall recognize that I, God, have kindled it. It shall not go out. And I said, my sovereign God, they say of me, he is just a riddle monger.
Which I don't love that translation, but so I don't really know what a riddle monger is, but what Reverend Lynn, what is your translation? Yeah. It's a mashalim, mashal mishalim is the phrase that's used. It's somebody who speaks in riddles, but also parables. It's someone who speaks in allegories. And they're basically, Ezekiel's saying here, they just think I'm speaking in allegories. They just think I'm using imagery. They don't, that's what they say about me, is I speak in riddles, which I get it. I mean, it's not a bad translation, but riddle monger is not a word that we use. It's somebody who is confusing to follow maybe because he's just not really getting to the point. Unlike Jeremiah, who just tells people flat out, I'm talking about lion cubs and trees and they're making fun of me, and I'm lying down on the, in the dirt, and I'm making bread on poop, and I'm doing like, they don't get me, they're like, this guy's just
A
weird,
kook.
right? So,
Then the word of God came to me, O mortal, set your face toward Jerusalem and proclaim against her sanctuaries and prophesy against the land of Israel. Say to the land of Israel, thus said God, I am going to deal with you. I will draw my sword from its sheath, and I will wipe out from you both the righteous and the wicked. In order to wipe out from you both the righteous and the wicked, my sword shall assuredly be unsheathed against all flesh from south to north, and all flesh shall know that I, God, have drawn my sword from its sheath, not to be sheathed again. And you, O mortal, sigh with tottering limbs and bitter grief, sigh before their eyes. And when they ask you, why do you sigh? Answer, because of the tidings that have come. Every heart shall sink and all hands hang nerveless. Every spirit shall grow faint and all knees turn to water because of the tidings that have come. It is approaching. It shall come to pass, declares the sovereign God.
that's the end of another phrase, right? So is that where your chapter ends?
Yeah, no, it goes on.
Still hasn't ended yet. Interesting.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's into 21.
It's 21?
Yeah.
Where did 21 start?
It started at, where did it, 21 started
Oh, in verse 6?
in verse. Well, it's hard for me to tell, in verse 6.
Yeah. So there was another one there where it says, then the word of the Lord came to me, which that means that prophecy to the Negev was just for a 4-line prophecy. This next one towards Jerusalem was the next.
But
The-
that's pretty
the-
devastating, sort of like the everything.
Yeah. And that's yeah, I mean, the phrase, yeah. But the phrase is pretty, the knees turning to water, which is an interesting phrase, but again, one we can get, which is that people have lost their courage, that they're just overwhelmed by fear. So again, this is another phrase. I mean, this is another end, Ne'um Adonai, right? And then the next phrase, of course, is going to be, and the word of the Lord came to me. So every time we see these small little prophecies, how do you break them? I mean, you can see the translation that Reverend Lynn's running out of is just broke it differently and said, well, we can break it here because these are small little prophecies. These are not like the last chapter, which was clearly a long prophecy and, was set up by this meeting that he had. And then these ones seem to be a bunch of little prophecies. So here, we'll read one more. We'll finish with this one.
The word of God came to me. O mortal, prophesy and say, thus said the sovereign, a sword has been whetted and polished. It has been whetted to wreak slaughter. Therefore, it has been ground to a brilliant polish. How can we rejoice? My child, it scorns the rod at every stick. It has been given to be polished and then grasped in the hand. For this has the sword been whetted. For this polished to be put into the hand of a slayer. Cry and wail, O mortal, for this shall befall my people. This shall befall all the chieftains of Israel. They shall be cast before the sword together with my people. Oh, strike the thigh in grief. Consider, how shall it fail to happen, seeing that it even scorns the rod, says the sovereign God.
So, yeah, that's a crazy, it's a very scary imagery, which is that this knife, the sword, right, the blade is coming.
I just thought it was interesting, that the sort of goes sharpened and it's polished so that it flashes like lightning. I've never thought of that as being sort of part of warfare.
Yeah, yeah, you're right, that the shine, the glint of it is scary in itself. Well, let's read a little bit more because this one is, even though it finishes with the thing about the sword, it's really not over because this next one is about the sword. But again, what's really scary about it is like, you had a rod, right? You scorned the rod. The rod was there to chastise you and to, make you pay attention. And there's the word is definitely, what's interesting here, it's the same word, right? It's the shevet. It's the same word as staff. But that didn't scare you. The sword is coming. And here's what it says.
Further, O mortal, prophesy, striking hand against hand. Let the sword strike a second time and get a third time. It is a sword for massacre, a sword for great carnage that presses upon them. Thus hearts shall lose courage, and many shall fall. At all their gates I have appointed slaughter by the sword. It is made to flash brilliantly. It is honed for slaughter. Be united, go to the right, turn left. Whither are you bound? I too will strike hand against hand and will satisfy my fury upon you. I, God, have spoken.
Yeah, and that's the end of that one, because there's a well, it's not a Neum Adonai, it's Adonai Debarti, which is a little different. I've spoken, but the next phrase is, then the word of the Lord came to me by he Devar Adonai. That's a clear indication that a new prophecy has started when you get that phrase, because sometimes, like the last one, O mortal, prophesy and say, well, no, it started with that by yeah. That one was clearly, yeah. This one didn't have a vayahi. In verse 19, it didn't say further, O mortal, prophesy, striking. That the reason why it says further is because that prophecy about the sword still goes with that one. The next we'll pick up next week, is the verses that finish up this chapter. And what's interesting about it is that, well, it could have been broken up here, but I don't, I'm not sure why this chapter, why. So this chapter for you though, Reverend Lynn, is still chapter 21, right? It's going to go all the way through here. So this chapter, it ends in verse 37. And again, with the next one was via he. Next week, we're online. I'm going to be out of town just for a day, but we will be online. Be online. Be online. All right, but we'll see you next week, folks. And in the meantime, hopefully we will not have too many reasons to be sad or overall other reason of being sad. Please, everybody, stay. We can't be sad. That's true. She does bring us joy. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Stay strong.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye,
Bye.
thank
you, Rosemary.
you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Well, we had drag bingo on Sunday, so there you go. Drag bingo was